Hello, welcome back to the Everything is Black and White podcast. I'm Andrew Musgrove, joined by Mark with us for the Monday show on Wednesday as we look back on Newcastle United's 2-1 defeat to Marseille in the Champions League. Very much repeat, and what's the right phrase? It's not that at all. It's rinse and repeat, isn't it,
Rinse and
Mark?
repeat, it certainly is.
That started just as well as Newcastle United's night ended in Marseille.
It started as well as Newcastle United's second half started yesterday.
Yes, probably messed it up in less time than Nick Pope did, actually.
I'd say so.
We'll continue, though. Yes, Marseille beat Newcastle United 2-1 in the Champions League. Newcastle had taken the lead after just 6 minutes. But I'm willing to bet that not many of you guys who were watching that game felt Newcastle United were going to build on it, simply because when they're away from home, even when they take the lead, they tend to lose. We're going to get into the game as well as look at the bigger picture. Mark, welcome back. How are you keeping? You well?
I'm good, yeah. Frustrated, slightly annoyed, but also unsurprised.
Well, that was one of the questions I had written down to ask you later in the episode, but I'll ask it now. And I was a little bit concerned that you answered to the question of whether you were shocked or surprised that Newcastle didn't press on for a second and then didn't manage to hold on to the lead. If the answer was no, then we'd be in a bit of bother, or rather Eddie Howe would be in a bit of bother, because again, I think the majority of fans said, you asked them the moment that goal goes in from Harvey Barnes, are Newcastle United going to either sit back or they're going to go for a second goal? I think nearly everyone would say they're going to sit back and maybe, possibly, most certainly lose the game, because away from home, that is what they do. Were you shocked? Were you surprised?
No. What I would say is I didn't necessarily mind the first half performance. It felt as if they had a little bit of control. And Monday we spoke about making play predictable, as they did with Manchester City. And I thought they did that for large parts of the first half, where they looked to threaten on the break. And look, let's be honest, if the final ball from Bruno Guimaraes, if the final ball from Jacob Murphy had been a little bit better, that lead could have been 2 or 3 by half time. The Murphy one in particular annoyed me, when he could have played in Gordon, I think it was, on the right-hand side as he's gone through. It's a pretty simple pass. The 2v1 decision-making, execution of pass just wasn't good enough. And I always felt as if they were allowing Marseille to play in front of them. And then second half was kind of just shambolic, if I'm honest. The tone was set from the first minute. So to answer your question in short, was I surprised? No.
Is that a concern that you, me, again, the majority of our audience probably weren't surprised at the final outcome? Is that a concern?
Being blunt, it shouldn't be a concern, because the only people that matter, the only outlook that matters, is what's in the dressing room. It probably is because of its external expectation, really. And I get what you mean.
The question of concern is that because we've seen Newcastle United do this, not just this season, but also towards the end of last season on the road, that we've just come to expect it in many ways. That is the concern, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. That is the concern. But it also, to me, the most concerning thing about it is it's the mentality within the dressing room. Possibly a lack of confidence away from home, or belief. Belief is probably the biggest thing. Now, we look at Newcastle's last, 3-4 away games now, which last night was always going to be tough because of the atmosphere, because of everything surrounding Marseille and going there. But when you look at the last 3 Premier League games, Brighton have got a horrific record down there. We know that. But West Ham in particular, given what was going on at their place, Brentford, given that you've got ahead in 2 of those, 3 of those games now, and not taking even a point, it's deeply concerning.
We'll talk about the mentality issue that I think underpins all of this, but I think it is important to say that this wasn't the performance at West Ham. This wasn't the performance at Brentford. First half, Newcastle United were relatively good. They were comfortable. It was a very open game. Neither side would look back on that first half performance or the game as a whole as an advert for defending. Really, it was a very open game, and they had chances in the second half, even though there were few and far between to get back into the game. So a different performance to what we saw down in the capital of both those games that they lost last on the road in the Premier League. But nonetheless, they have lost after taking the lead, which is a cause for concern. We'll start with the team news, because there was a lot of upset at the starting 11, particularly because Dan Burn came back in. There was also Anthony Gordon up top, and Joe Willock came in as well. I have to say that I wasn't surprised at the changes. Me and John Gibson predicted that these changes, particularly Dan Burn in for Lewis Hall and Joe Linton dropping out for somebody, would happen. And we said as well that there's probably a strong likelihood that Valdemar would drop out because he needs to be protected in terms of the fitness with the tight schedule coming up. Are any of those changes ideal? Not at all. In an ideal world, Lewis Hall can play 3 games in a week. If Valdemar needs to drop out, you have Johan Wissa. And if you're going to drop Joe Linton, then you're going to have someone to bring in who, is actually in form and firing. But this isn't an ideal world. Newcastle United have been dealt a bad hand in terms of injuries, and these players who are good players just aren't performing. But Eddie Howe has to make those tough decisions, and it's all about managing the squad. So I thought the reaction to the start 11, particularly Dan Burn returning, he didn't actually end up playing left back, was just totally over the top.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that, and I said this after the game on social media, that it's not fatal to Newcastle's hopes of getting through. It doesn't help, obviously, losing the game. So maybe Howe's looked at it and thought, right, we will try and get something from the game. But if I'm going to rotate, I'd rather make these changes for Marseille than Everton at the weekend, which feels like a big game in terms of the Premier League campaign, and trying to stop this horrible away record and trying to progress up the Premier League and get some momentum building going into the sort of festive period. So I think that's maybe why. What I'll say, and again, it's all within hindsight, isn't it? That I thought Joe Willock had his best game for a long time. I thought he looked good, gave energy, kind of elements of the Joe Willock we know he can be. The formation was interesting, the little change in formation. Burn did all right first half, but was part of a chaotic second half performance. So yeah, I think the Gordon thing, he's kind of the last man standing in terms of, or the only man standing at the moment, in terms of who would replace Valdemar up top. Look, if Will Asulo's fit, we may have seen him given a chance up there. We certainly would have seen Johan Wissa if he'd been fit. So yeah, I agree. The team selection didn't really surprise me. The reaction, I think, is just born out of frustration, and I think there is a lot of frustration out there at the moment, and a lot of it is understandable. I get it, I really do. But I think Howe was kind of left with very little option.
I get the frustration at the performance and the results on the road, but I totally just didn't accept the frustration when it came to this, because there is the Everton game in the background, the question of what is more important, where the priority is. But also, it is just a question of managing Lewis Hall in terms of his return. Now, people say he played twice for England and he's done all right against Man City. He was fantastic. Yeah, but he came off with cramp. And could you have imagined the fallout had Eddie Howe played him against Marseille, then play him against Everton, he picks up an injury, which you then could pin back to the fact he's played too many games in the last fortnight. Like, Eddie Howe then would be blamed for not managing Lewis Hall's return correctly. You know, he's got the insight from the medical staff. He's got the insight from the sports science department. He's seeing things that we don't. You know, he's not making that decision because he wants to play Dan Burn. This whole question of loyalty is also a frustrating one, because you ask him who wants to play. He obviously wants to play his best left back, which is Lewis Hall. But at this moment in time, Lewis Hall just is not fit enough to do that. That's the hand that Eddie Howe's dealt with, and he's got to manage that and think long term, not just about the Everton game, but the actual season as a whole.
It's a bigger picture, isn't it?
Yeah.
He's got to look at the bigger picture, yeah. So, look, I think there have been times recently when I've looked at Eddie Howe's team selection and thought, that's a little bit of a shock. Last night really wasn't. I think the only one maybe was the Willock one to an extent, but at the same time, I think that was justified by his performance.
It's interesting you should say that, because I've got some stats about Willock's performance. Now, he made 19 out of 20 passes in 72 minutes, which you could look at either way. He was very accurate with his passes, although there weren't many to complete. Ramsey had 12 minutes, had 18 minutes, and made 11 out of 11, which some people would say, well, there you go, straight away. Look, who's more creative? It's based on that, it must be Ramsey. But then in the middle of the park, Willock won 5 out of 7 duels, which was among the highest of the evening. So he obviously gives that other element of trying to break up play, getting Newcastle back on the ball, and being progressive in their movement. It wasn't a performance from Joe Willock that will grab any headlines, that will last long in the memory, but I certainly thought it was encouraging. Will he play on Saturday against Everton? I don't think he will. I don't necessarily think Joe Linton will. I certainly wouldn't be picking Joe Linton in the middle of the park. However, it's probably a flip of a coin between Willock and Ramsey.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think it depends on how Eddie sees the game going. Does he see Newcastle having the majority possession, in which case he probably do play one of the other two, one of Willock or Ramsey. If he sees Newcastle being up against it, where they need to press, he play Joe Linton. I just want to see more of Ramsey. I don't feel as if we've seen enough of him. And I know he's had injuries and such like, and been trying to get back towards full fitness, but I'd just like to see. I thought he looked, I don't want to get too carried away at all and trying to overplay what he did, but he looked as if he was given a little bit of forward thrust last night from midfield. And I think there's 100% a player in there. We know that from his time at Villa and little signs we've seen at Newcastle. So it'd be nice to see him. The other side is, can Joe Willock handle 2 starts in a week or 2 starts in 5 days? That'll probably play a big part in it.
Now, we have recorded the match preview with John Gibson, so check that out on Thursday morning. Me and John spoke about the midfield, but we didn't actually discuss that point. I mean, I would expect your work to be fit enough to handle 2 games in a week, and I actually think he's that kind of player who needs that.
Yeah,
he's a form sort of player, if that makes sense. And I was really impressed with him against Spurs in the Cup, and then he wasn't in the side for the next game, and I thought, well, he's done really well there. You've got to keep that momentum going. So, if there were anything that Eddie Howe enjoyed in his performance against Marseille, then I would be an advocate of starting him on Saturday against Everton. But like you say, it depends how Eddie Howe sees the game going. Out of possession, it's got to be Joe Linton, but in possession, is it Ramsey? Is it Willock? And a lot of people would actually say it would have to be Jacob Ramsey. He went at 5 at the back, like you said, Mark, which was a little bit of a surprise. Tino on the left, Murphy on the right. Neither looked overly comfortable. I mean, they did all right, but Tino Foley was brilliant against Man City in what is his natural position on the right. He had a tough evening.
I thought both of them did. Yeah, I mean, you look at Marseille's threat out wide. They do a lot of the positive attack and play comes away positions. They like to get the ball out wide, similar to the way De Zerbi functioned at Brighton. You know what they're going to do in wide positions. They're going to be sort of high press, force you back. And I thought a lot of the game last night resembled Newcastle's games against a De Zerbi Brighton. But you're right, yeah, they just never really seemed to fully get to grips with Paixão and Greenwood out wide. First half, they managed that situation better, but second half, I thought just got completely overrun in wide positions. I got why he went with a 3 at the back, because
he's got no choice.
No, exactly, yeah. But I think there are games this season where that will work. And I think the players that they've got, particularly Shaw's in the middle, where he can have that freedom to, bring the ball out. He's got the balance of Chow and Botman or Burn if Burn plays left side centre back. I think it can work, but you've got to have the right wing backs. Now, Jacob Murphy is not a wing back. We know that. I think he can switch off at times. Tino, I think, played as a right-sided wing back. I think will be able to do that role. But I think in an ideal world, Eddie Howe wouldn't have played that formation last night.
It's hard though, isn't it, for Jacob Murphy to be asked to play in that position. Obviously, you would think Emil Kraft, Kieran Trippier ahead of him. Obviously, if Hall's fit enough, he's on the left and Livramento on the right. But there was one moment when Aubameyang heads wide in the first half, and you can see that Murphy's 3 or 4 yards behind the play, and he only kind of jolts into switching on pretty much when Aubameyang's met it with his head, and that's the kind of, I think, difficulty that he has, because it's not his natural position. There's not that instinct. It's a little bit like playing Anthony Gordon up top. He hasn't got that instinct as a striker, and Murphy hasn't got that instinct as the last line defence, because it's just not natural to him. Not his fault. It is what it is. But it does lead us to a question about January. And do Newcastle United, we've talked a lot about going out and getting competition and cover for left back, but are we looking at the right back and thinking they need the same? Because we've gone from Kieran Trippier having a minor injury to not knowing how long he's going to be out for. Emil Kraft, for whatever reason, not in the squad against City, in the squad against Marseille, but then not on the bench. Clearly something's not right there. And it wouldn't surprise you if on Saturday the options are limited once again at right back. January, do they need to go in the market?
No, but I think end of the season there's a very, 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 very big call to be made there. I just don't think it's a priority in January. I think the priorities will lie elsewhere in recruitment. But I think given Trippier and Kraft are both out of contract next summer, there is 100% a need to go and give Tino Livramento serious competition. Now, this isn't someone who can come in, but I think this all over the squad, by the way. Newcastle shouldn't be looking for players who, he can come in and, if X, Y, or Z drops out through injury or whatever, can go in and do a job. That's not what Newcastle need going forward now. They're at the stage where could a potential signing genuinely challenge week in, week out, where you go, well, if Tino Livramento is not playing, this player will go in and could take the shirt for the next 10 games, whatever. I just don't think, whatever the spend is going to be in January, I don't think it'll be a big spend, if I'm honest. I think, as I said the other week, the majority of spending will be done in the summer. So I just think there'll be priorities elsewhere.
But does it become more of a priority if, say, in a month's time, Kieran Trippier isn't back, Emil Kraft still isn't fit? Does that change it? Does it depend on the fitness of those two?
So then you're kind of looking at being reactive in the market. And I don't feel as if Newcastle are necessarily that way. They try and be a little bit proactive. I'd be shocked if it happens. The most I could see happening is if they can find a player who can play both sides in January and play right and left back. But there's not many of those around. Ironically, we have one of them in Tino. I just don't think it's going to be a priority.
6 minutes on the clock then. Harvey Barnes gets the opener. Really nice finish. Good work between Willock and Tonali. Ball into the box. Gordon with a little touch onto it, and Barnes reacts first to put it into the back of the net. And he's a man in fine form. And we've got to think about it. When he was first signed, and you probably said for 12 months after he became a Newcastle United player, there was so much criticism. Why have Newcastle spent the best part of 40 million on him? Don't need another left winger. He's not worth it. But this is why I actually think Elanga can still come good. This is part of the reason I still hold out faith, because look at Harvey Barnes now. He's proved himself to be worth every single penny Newcastle paid for him. And he's the only man scoring goals. He's the only man really looking a threat. I mean, obviously they lost that game, but where would Newcastle United be this season without Barnes is unthinkable. I've been really impressed with him. That left wing position now, even with Gordon back fully fit, it's his to lose, isn't it? It's Harvey Barnes' position to lose, surely.
So if I can go back to what I said in terms of the previous question, when Eddie Howe wants to make a change on that left-sided forward role, or left wing role, whatever Newcastle does, now he's got two really, really good options in there. He can play Barnes and know that he's going to provide. For me, he has the shirt. Regardless of what happens on Saturday, he has to stay in the side. Gordon, I don't think should start the game. I mean, there's another conversation to be had there about mindset when he goes to his old club. But I think regardless of that, Barnes has to start. I love when he gets in possession of the ball. I know he missed chances on Saturday. We spoke about that on Monday. But I just love how positive he is when he gets on the ball. And when that ball fell to him in the box, I was up already. I just thought he's going to score. And you just knew it. His first touch, getting it away, getting the shot away so quickly, just give the keeper no reaction time whatsoever. It's such a good finish. And he makes it look simple. It's not simple.
Yeah. And I know I've tried to hold back the negativity when it comes to Eddie Howe's team picks last night against Marseille. But the one way I would definitely be on the train to questions would be if Harvey Barnes was replaced by Anthony Gordon for Saturday's game against Everton. It simply cannot happen. He's the first name on that team sheet. He's in form, and Anthony Gordon just doesn't deserve it. Like, he does not deserve it. I think he started against Marseille more because Nick Voldemort needs a rest rather than
He's
anything
injured.
he's done in training
Yeah.
or anything he's done this season. He just does not deserve a start. We know ability-wise, he's fantastic. I still maintain he's one of the most important players in Newcastle United's squad. But the team has to be picked on merit. And if it's not picked on merit, it then has to be picked on the basis of fitness and what have you. And as we stand here, Anthony Gordon has done nothing to warrant a place in that starting 11 for Saturday or going forward. You know, it's down to him, in my opinion, because he will be introduced from the bench on Saturday. And again, on Tuesday against Spurs, if Barnes is fit enough, it's there you need to take your chances. It's there you need to say, do you know what? I'm still here. I'm fighting for my players. Come off the bench, make an impact, because every single start he's had in the Premier League, he's been absolutely shocking.
Yeah, I think I try and put myself in Harvey Barnes' shoes here, and I think if that conversation was had on Friday, where Eddie Howe sits you down and says, "Look, I'm going to start Anthony on Saturday," I think I'd be taking the paint off the walls having a go at him.
I'd be fuming.
I'd be absolutely foaming. And it's one of those where he's the man in form. He's looking dangerous. And most importantly, I think for the first time in his career at Newcastle, he's looking confident, fully confident that he can go make an impact. Now, when I watched him last night in possession of the ball, again, I said, he looked so positive. He was trying to get at his man. He was bringing other people into the game. I thought he had a great game on that left side. And I just can't see any way. It would defy all logic unless there's an underlying injury or fitness issues or anything like that, which I don't think there is. It would defy logic if he was to be, and it would be dropped, by the way. If he was to be dropped, it makes no sense. I don't think he will. I think he will stay on the side. But the other side of it is, I'd be equally annoyed if he was shifted to the right to accommodate Gordon.
So after going 1-0 up, as we discussed right at the start of the show, I don't think many people are too shocked at the fact Newcastle didn't really push for a set. And they had their chances in the first half. Gordon had one save, but it was a bit of a tame effort. What is the reason, do you think, for Newcastle United, when they go 1-0 up away from home, do they tend to sit back and try and hit teams on the counter rather than going for broke? I mean, you don't want them to go gun-ho because that exposes you at the back. That leaves a lot of space. But make no bones about it, Marseille, not just in the first half, but actually throughout the game, at the back, they looked so vulnerable.
Yeah, it did.
And yet, Newcastle United never really seemed intent on going for a second goal. And, you know, they'd be even more vulnerable right after they've conceded with Marseille. And you were thinking there, just come on, just go, just do a little bit more. And look, obviously, yes, they wanted a second. Of course they did. I mean, but on the pitch, they never really threatened Marseille too much after that first goal.
I think, again, I go back to confidence and belief. I think that there's a thing where at St. James's, if they were to get ahead, they would have done that. But away from home, there's some sort of mental block there now. I will say again, I thought they got themselves into some good positions to really hurt Marseille. I go back to the Bruno pass where he's tried to play in Barnes and he's overhit it. There was the Murphy pass when he could have released Gordon and Gordon would have literally been in on goal. It's just poor execution, poor technique, and the decision-making in key areas was just really wasn't where it should be. But I do think there's a bigger picture here of, as we've said, you know, this confidence in away games. I think it's starting to become a massive issue that could hamper progression across a number of competitions.
Yeah, because I was thinking about it on the drive in today. You know, away from home, goal up, and they just don't seem to have that confidence. Now, I don't think it's instruction to sit back. I really, really don't, because that would just make no sense, especially within the first 10 minutes of getting the lead. You know, that's when you should be saying, let's go, let's go, let's go. You think the game against Man City, they won the front foot when they had the opportunities. It was discipline, but they had confidence. They smelt blood. And you're right, at home, that's what they tend to do. It can't all be about playing at home and the confidence of the crowd and home comforts, because the bottom line is an elite football club doesn't have that separation. An elite football club, and Newcastle United aren't there yet, clearly, and they haven't got the squad depth and the talent to be called an elite football club. But that's where they want to go, and I think they're on the cusp of it. You know, if a few more signings, a few more seasons in the Champions League. That's where they want to be. But Marseille aren't an elite football club. And in that instance of getting that first goal, they should be going for a second. Yes, they're the chances, but they never look confident of adding to that tally. And it's a massive concern because at home, they tend to look like a top 6 side. Away from home, especially this season, they really don't.
No, I think it's a really good point. I will come back to the elite discussion when we start the second half conversation, because there's something I've had a thought about there. But no, you're right. It's a mentality thing, and it's the elite clubs go and impose themselves on opposition no matter where the game is, and they control games in difficult environments, which last night certainly was. Now, again, we spoke on Monday about the way Newcastle managed the Manchester City game, when even when they were under pressure, they kept City in front of them, and very rarely did they get in behind. Now, I never felt as if Newcastle were in control of that game last night when they weren't in possession. There were parts when they forced Marseille wide, but I always felt as if they were just one pass away from they're going to get in behind, they're going to create a chance. That frustrated me because I thought all of the good elements of the out of possession stuff on Saturday were missing against Marseille, and that's really frustrating. And one, I think it's a concentration thing. I think they lack concentration at times and allowed Marseille in behind. Again, decision making was obviously not where it should be. There has to be some serious conversations about the away form. Not with us. We could sit here all day and talk about it. But within the dressing room, within the squad, within the management team, it has to be discussed at depth as to what is really going on in the players' heads. Why is it so different? Why aren't they making those bold decisions in and out of the possession? Why can't they replicate what they're doing at home away? I'm fairly certain, well, I'm really certain that those conversations will be happening, but they need to be now. It's more than words, it's actions.
Well, the biggest frustration is that you put in a world-class display against Manchester City, and I don't say that lightly, but it was unbelievable. I said it on the Monday show. Eddie Howe's 100th win, that for me is pushing at the top 5 on the list. It was absolutely brilliant. It was a tactical masterclass. To then rock up in Marseille, and it's one of those, isn't it? Like, if they played badly and then got hammered, it'd be one thing. But actually, what you've done is you've given yourself a huge platform in one of the most ferocious atmospheres that you were ever likely to play in, against a side who are not very good in the Champions League, to put it kindly. You've given yourself the platform, so it's even more frustrating. And then you add in the fact that although it was different to West Ham and Brentford, it's followed the same path, and that's the even bigger frustration. Like, we've been here before. Now, I kind of can subscribe to the notion a little bit that, it's fine margins. If Gordon takes that chance, if that pass from Bruno comes off, if that pass from Murphy comes off, it's a whole entire different game. If Nick Pope doesn't lose his mind within 20 seconds of the second half, it's a totally different game and result. Will Marseille get back into it? Potentially. Always that danger, but they never look themselves like they were going to run wild with Newcastle until that second goal goes in, and then you go, oh my God, could this be a little bit embarrassing? Newcastle managed to kind of get a foothold back into the game. And it can be different, but the point is, it's not. At the end of the day, the bottom line is Newcastle United have gone 1-0 up and once again been unable to hold on to a lead away from home.
Overall, the biggest frustration is that it's completely self-inflicted.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest annoyance watching that game, was that everything about letting Marseille get back on top, get back in the game, get the equaliser, get the winning goal, it was all completely self-inflicted and really abysmal decision-making and management of the game, which I know is kind of a modern coaching phrase, is game management. But it's true. And Newcastle didn't manage the game well. It was dismal second half.
And that's the story on the road for the majority of the season. And that can't be put on Eddie Howe, because that's the players, isn't it? That's down to the players, not...
There's got to be accountability. The players have got to take accountability when they're on the pitch for decision-making. I think, look, Eddie picks the team, but I think in modern-day football, it's quite easy to go to the manager when you want to point blame. At some point, and it should have happened now, the players have got to take that accountability. You know, Eddie hasn't told Nick Pope to rush 40, whatever it was, 40 yards from his line to close down Aubameyang when, for my money, Malik Thiaw had the situation under control, sorry.
But we talk about them sitting off and sitting back and absorbing and looking like the game plan is to hit on the counter. Some people would argue, well, if that's the case, there must be an instruction somewhere from the touchline. That's one question. I mean, the second question is about this confidence issue that clearly is there, that mentality issue, which is clearly there. How does Eddie Howe solve that? I mean, what does he do on the touchline that gets them going, that gets them more focused, gets them switched on, gets them to believe that in these arenas away from Tyneside, they do belong and they can go out and get the results?
I think it's reiterating that we know they can do it, because we've seen during his time in charge that they have gone to tough places and got results. It may be, I'm not going to say going back to basics, because Newcastle don't need to go back to basics. That would be ridiculous. But it's reiterating the messages that led them to get results at the likes of Tottenham last season, the likes of Manchester United last season. It's not going to be easy to do that, because the players, I think, now will be very much in the moment. But I just look at it and think, it's the same players by and large, you know, barring your Chows and players like that. We know they can do it. We know that they haven't been far away from good results this season away from home. It's like you said, fine margins. It's, again, the self-inflicted nature of what's gone on. And last night was possibly the most prime example of that.
Come on then. We have to talk about it a little bit in depth, aren't we? This equaliser. 24 seconds into the second half, and Nick Pope rushes off his line, totally unnecessary, because Malik Thiaw is going to come across and he's going to force Aubameyang into the corner. There's no danger. I don't understand why Nick Pope has decided to rush off his line in that instance. Against City on Saturday, there was a moment, as I mentioned on the Monday show, where he rushes off the line and Haaland is through and he scuffs the shot and he puts it wide. For me, that was great goalkeeping by Nick Pope. He made the decision to come out. He looked confident in doing it. Haaland looks up, doesn't expect him to be there. He forces Haaland into putting it wide, which was very unlike Erling Haaland. Some people came back at me on social media when I put that out as a tweet after the game and said, no, what are you on about? Like 9 times out of 10, Haaland puts that in the back of the net. But for me, he was forced into that miss by Nick Pope. That was necessary, because if Haaland gets the opportunity, gets it under control, you know, he's gonna score, isn't he? This was not necessary. This was totally unnecessary. And I've watched it 1,000 times, and I still don't understand what on earth he's thinking. I think that's probably the issue. He's not thinking. He's just had a rush of blood to the head. He's come out. You can see Malik Thiaw ushering him back into the box. And again, there's two bottom lines here. Malik Thiaw's covering. He's going to force him wide. If he stays in his box, Nick Pope, there was absolutely no danger. They don't get that. They don't get an equaliser.
Probably going to go into a wider conversation here, if you don't mind.
Feel free.
So we spoke about Newcastle wanting to be an elite club and a regular challenger for major honours, for Champions League qualification year in, year out, for at some point in the future, Premier League titles. Now, firstly, I'll say I think the time is now to bring in Aaron Ramsdale. I think he has to play on Saturday. Do I think he will? I'm not so sure.
I don't think he will.
But I think the other side of that is we shouldn't pretend that Aaron Ramsdale is this consistent goalkeeper where
he's a stopgap.
He's made mistakes. So my point is, and I'm going to jump further next summer, one of Newcastle's priorities has to be to bring in an elite goalkeeper, because no side in world football at any level, in any division, is ever successful without a top goalkeeper. Now, you can ask us who that is. I don't know. But there are probably attainable goalkeepers out there that will, I would bracket as, if not world class, that next level below. Because I don't 100% trust either to get Newcastle to be where they want to be or where they say they want to be. So that would be one of my priorities for next summer, is go and spend big money if you have to, and go and get, I think they missed out on Mamadashvili. I think he could have been. I know he hasn't really impressed at Liverpool. I get that. But I do think when they had the opportunity to go for him, or reportedly had that opportunity, they kind of missed out, because when he was at Valencia, he was incredible. I think the Trafford one, although I still have some misgivings on him, I think that could have been something that would have been better than what we have. But they absolutely must go out. If they are true, if they are serious about being an elite club, they have to go out and get an elite goalkeeper next summer.
I think James Trafford, from what we saw very early on at Man City, I think it would be one of those where you'd need to have 6 months or so working under Eddie Howe to get him up to that level where you would want him as your number one. He was quite good at come off his line in those few games he had at City, but there were countless errors within his game. And I think if we're talking about Newcastle United upgrading at goalkeeper, which I totally agree with you, for me, Aaron Ramsdale is a stopgap. And what I would like to see come the summer is that Nick Pope would either settle down into that number 2 or 3 role, or even leave. I wouldn't be against them signing Aaron Ramsdale, but then going out, as you say, and spending big money. But if you're saying that, I think the majority of our listeners and viewers would say, well, I don't want them spending 30, 40 million on James Trafford because he's not that elite goalkeeper.
I agree with that. I was just talking about past targets. But there's a reason Manchester City went and got Donnarumma. Again, I said it. I know he didn't have the greatest game on Saturday, but said on Monday that for me, he's the best in the world. As a goalkeeper, forget all the playing out from the back and all that stuff. As a goalkeeper, an all-round goalkeeper, he's the best in the world. Again, I don't know who that would be next summer. There will be targets that will become available we may not be aware of, but I absolutely think Newcastle have to go out and get a top goalkeeper, because if they want to be solid at the back, if they want to build on solid foundations, if they want to progress towards where they want to be, they absolutely have to have that reliable and trustworthy and elite is the key word, elite goalkeeper.
Yeah. If you've got any suggestions, do drop it into the comments about which goalkeeper you would like to see Newcastle United sign this summer transfer window coming up. Ramsdale, for many, should start on Saturday. I don't think he will. I think Nick Pope will be the man between the sticks. I think Eddie Howe, I don't think he'll make that decision. It's a huge, huge call. And yes, Nick Pope has made error after error recently, but he's also made good saves, which have kept Newcastle United in games or won Newcastle United games. I don't think that's enough to warrant him starting on Saturday against Everton, but I think it will be enough. I think he will start.
Can I ask you a question, right? So, and I thought about this last night. I'm trying to think how to phrase it, and I'll just put it straight. So, let's say the last 3 away games, Sven Botman has dropped errors that have cost Newcastle United goals.
Yes. Well, 2.
Well, yeah. Would he be dropped?
Yeah.
So
he has been.
Well, he has, yeah. Exactly. So what's the difference with the goalkeeper?
Well, but there is a big difference. There is a big difference, because I think with an outfield player, you can pass it off as rotation, you can pass it off as rest. I don't think you can do that with a goalkeeper. I think it's quite final.
Right.
So how many teams do you see rotating their number one goalkeeper?
I get that. I do.
You don't.
I do. I'm being slightly facetious here, but the other side, another question then. If you're Aaron Ramsdale sitting watching those 3 errors, are you not thinking, what have I now got to do? And I've said this before, what have you got to do to get on that side? That's where I'll be thinking, if I'm Aaron Ramsdale, that to me will cause slight issues, because he must be thinking, I don't know what's got to happen for me to get a chance in the Premier League or the Champions League. Now, again, I'll go back to, this isn't me saying Aaron Ramsdale doesn't make errors. We know he does. There's a reason, again, why Arsenal went out and got David Raya, who they felt could become he wasn't an elite goalkeeper at Brentford, but they felt he could become, and he has. He's been unbelievable since he's been at Arsenal. So I'm not saying Aaron Ramsdale is the solution to all Newcastle's problems at all, but I do think now is the time, kind of from a mental point of view as well, just to take Pope out the firing line for a bit. And I'm not saying it's a final decision, but it is something I think that needs to be considered very, very seriously now.
I think that time was a few games ago, to be quite honest. But I would disagree. I think when you change your goalkeeper for Premier League game, I think that becomes pretty fine. I think that sends a huge message. I don't know how easy it is to bounce back. I don't think it's easy to get back into the side once that happens. You know, yes, you probably maybe see him back for the Fulham game potentially, but in terms of that league starting 11, I think once you make that call, that's the call, and it sets you on the road to the end, really, when it comes to Nick Pope as first choice.
Is sending that message a bad thing?
No, look, if it was me, Aaron Ramsdale, I think should be in net, and then I think he would be the number one going forward in the eyes of nearly everybody. But what I'm saying is, it's not as simple as that, is there? Because there's all those ripple effects. It's then, you know, Nick Pope and his feelings, and I get the football club is the most important thing, but Eddie's got to manage that really delicately.
Oh, he does.
And you know, you chuck in there's that discussion about loyalty, and we could go back and forth about that, but it's such a friend of ours, a fellow journalist, and we were texting last night after the game. I'm sure you won't mind me sharing what he said. He said it's nuclear. Making that call is nuclear. I know he'll be watching, so hello to you. But that's what he said, nuclear, and he's right. He's spot on with that definition, and that's why I just don't know if Eddie Howe will make that. Well, I'm confident he won't make that decision on Saturday. And it's also a little bit to do with what he said after the game when he was asked about Nick Pope. So I'll play Eddie Howe's answer to the question about whether he's concerned about Nick Pope after a series of mistakes between the sticks.
Recently, what do you make of that, and are you concerned about it?
Well, I think I'm concerned when we concede goals, regardless of who's at fault. I think we have to look at everything with a balanced head. Nick saved us many times. He made some really good saves against Manchester City just 2 days ago. That's the life of a goalkeeper. But I certainly back him.
Chris Wolf. It's 4 successive.
So there we have it. He says, I certainly back him. Now, part of me wonders, is that the backing that Keir Starmer gives to everyone, and then a week later they're out of a job, or is that the backing that Eddie Howe gives everyone, and he will indeed remain in net for Everton and for the foreseeable future? Let us know in the comments.
There's some very wide conversations we had there as well, isn't there?
I thought that was quite good.
They're not for this podcast, though. It's a very different one.
So yeah, then the second goal comes. If we're being ultra critical, should Fabian Schär and Nick Pope both do better with this?
Pope's reaction time is minimal because it's so close. I mean, what is it? It's inside his 6-yard box, isn't it? And it's a good cross. I will say that's a really good cross where I think if Aubameyang gets any sort of decent contact on it, it's near impossible for Pope to save it. The reaction time is, less than a second, I would say. I thought that the situation for that goal wasn't managed well at all, from allowing the cross, allowing the ball to come out wide, allowing the cross to come in. And yeah, Shaw's kind of switched off. Well, he has switched off. There's no kind of about it, is there? And allowed Aubameyang to get in front of him. I think it's actually a really clever finish. I wouldn't blame Pope on that one. There will be probably goalkeeper coaches and goalkeepers out there probably screaming at me for that, but I wouldn't blame him. But I would look at Shaw and just say, you've switched off. And the problem is, and there's a phrase I keep going back to, it's very difficult to win games at the elite level, and you do get punished for switching off, even for the briefest of seconds.
Is the wider point about just how Newcastle United were clearly rattled by that first goal?
I think their heads are gone.
Yeah.
I think the circumstances around, you could see when, I can't remember who it was, but after the first goal, there was shots of a couple of Newcastle players where you could see they were frustrated, I'll say, if I'm being kind, angry, if I'm possibly not being so kind. I think there was a little bit of a head loss for a second. Look, what I will say again, and this is a wider picture thing, I felt as if there was a question of leadership at that point. Who's getting the players in and saying, right, come on, let's regroup. We can go again here. We can take control of this game. Maybe it did happen. We didn't see it from where we were. We didn't see the pictures of that. But I feel as if there is just a little bit of a lack of leadership at key times at times in the game.
The other key point to kind of maybe discuss is that once again on the road, you're not just looking at 1 or 2 players who haven't turned up. You're looking at 5 or 6, 7 players who are so far below what they managed to do at home against Manchester City into this game. Bruno, for as good as he was against Man City, he was nowhere near the levels. Like the passes weren't coming off, and he was getting very frustrated towards the end. It's a concern, and look, you can criticize Eddie Howe for whatever you want in terms of team selection, approach, instruction, what have you. But at the end of the day, if 5 or 6 of your stars have dropped so far below what they put out just 3-4 days ago, the manager can't do anything about that. That's where the responsibility has to come from the players and that leadership of and just getting a grips with the game. Like there's an issue within the camp away from home quite clearly. That's not down to Eddie Howe, that's down to the players, and there has to be a collective responsibility with those who are starting the game and ultimately not turning up away from St James's Park.
I think the disappointment, as you say, is that too many didn't turn up, but also how many of those players coming away from that game last night as an individual, forget the team for now, can look at themselves and say, I hit the levels I wanted to tonight. You could say Willock, I think, to a degree. Bonds, because of his goal and his positivity. Beyond that, Chow. I thought Chow did all right. Had a good game. But apart from that, I'm not really sure we can say too many others. Now that's, not even a third of your team that have hit the levels you would expect them to. Yeah, this goes on the players, I think. And Eddie Howe is getting a lot of flack on social media, and I think he's the one where it's easy to do. As I've said, it is easy to aim it at the manager and the coaching staff, but I just think, again, there is a need for some responsibility and accountability from the players, and I find that has to happen sooner rather than later, particularly when there are so many big away games coming up over the next few weeks.
Well, I've just checked Bruno's Instagram. I'm glad to see there hasn't been any story uploaded of an apology, because I'm a little bit sick of seeing these after away games. It's all about what you do on the pitch.
It's words. There's too many on social media now who throw out the apologies afterwards, and it becomes white noise. Forget that. Focus on putting in the performances that you know you can put in. Basically, the simple way to say it, it's actions, not words. That's the top point.
And look, the frustration that we're all feeling comes from the fact we know how good they can be, because against Man City, they were bloody brilliant. But here, away from St James's Park, there's just an issue that there just doesn't seem to be a solution that Eddie Howe can find at this moment in time. I'm sure he will do, and he needs to, because obviously the Champions League is still, the table's still looking relatively comfortable. They're in that last automatic spot. But the Premier League is the big issue. You know, they've got to go to Everton, and they've really got to win, to be quite honest, because if Everton win, they go 6 points ahead of Newcastle United, and that's a lot of points to claw back even at this stage of the season. Yeah, it's a difficult challenge for Eddie Howe to find the solution, but I'm sure he will do. Go on.
Do you know, after Saturday, I was sitting there Saturday night, and I went back and watched the game on Match of the Day as well. And I sat there thinking, right, there's your foundation for an improvement across the board, not just at home, but away from home in every competition. And it felt a bit like, what was the game last season where they'd been beaten at Brentford and then they won? Was it Carabao Cup game?
Chelsea 4-1, hadn't they? 4-2.
Was it Chelsea midweek?
It may have been.
That game to me felt like a catalyst for what followed. And it was that long run before was it 7 or 8, 9 games, whatever it was, before the Brentford game, Bournemouth game at home. Saturday felt as if it should have been that. And I'm not saying it still couldn't be. They could go to Everton and win. I don't think they will, but they could. And then you've got all these big games coming up to Christmas and after as well. Yet it feels like all of the momentum gained from the City win has now gone. And they're now fighting an uphill battle to try and regain that momentum in that form, if you can call one win form.
I agree. Like, you felt like it could be the kickstart, but also a large part of me felt it probably wouldn't be, just especially away from home. Like, was it any surprise really that Newcastle put in a great performance against Man City? I don't think anyone was too shocked. Would it be surprised if they lost against Everton? No, it really wouldn't be. And that is the fundamental issue that Eddie Howe has to sort out, because we are in this vicious cycle where against these elite clubs, Newcastle tend to turn up and put in a good performance and often win the game. But away from home against middle of the road clubs, no disrespect to Everton, if they come back having lost 3-1 on Saturday, I'll be sat here on Monday saying I'm not shocked at that.
It does feel as if we'll be having these same conversations week in, week out until something changes, which at the moment I don't see it happening. I look at the fixtures coming up and I think, yeah, you look at home, yeah, we'll win that. They'll probably beat Fulham in the Carabao Cup. As a Burnley as well at home. Obviously, you'd fancy them to win that because Burnley are really struggling this season.
Yeah, home's not an issue.
No, this is my point. And look, at some point on this podcast, we are going to mention that one of the upcoming away games in the derby. As it stands, I don't think Newcastle can go into any away game, no matter who it's against, with any confidence.
But see, I'm not actually.
I know what you're saying.
Concerned about that game as many others are, because I feel like it is exactly the kind of game that Newcastle United and the likes of Bruno Tonali will get up for. They could continue this horrendous cycle of winning at home, being abject on the road, up until that derby day, and then go to Sunderland and beat them 4-0. And I wouldn't be shocked at that, because I feel like it is the game that you could bet your last penny that the Newcastle Stars would get up for and put in a brilliant performance and win, and then they'd go up against whoever's next on the list. I think it'll be Chelsea at home, so whoever's next on the away list,
Manchester United.
Manchester at Old Trafford. We know what they're like. Go down there and lose 3-0. It wouldn't shock us. Hopefully, by the time we get there, Eddie Howe has found the solution. Look, the solution to a large part will be more minutes in the legs for Tino and Lewis Hall to get that rhythm of play, to get that balance, because once they get a little bit fitter, a little bit more up to match speed, I think things will improve. And of course, João Wissa, it's a subject for a deeper discussion. I hope he doesn't go to AFCON. I'm not comfortable asking him not to do that, because he wants to play for his country, wants to represent them. But if Newcastle United are going to turn this around, I think they need him here while AFCON's going on.
I would agree on everything that you just said there about Wissa. I think in an ideal world, he would stay and get match fitness with Newcastle and be part of the squad. But I don't think Newcastle will have the power to stop him going. I don't think it would be right for them to ask him not to, which I know will be difficult for some people to hear, but I think he will want to go. And I know it'll be hard to hear that for Newcastle fans, because I do find it hard to say he owes us, because he didn't pick up the injury intentionally. This is something that's just happened. He is working hard to get back to fitness. We know that. There's nobody will be more frustrated than him, because he'll come up here thinking, I've got the number 9 shirt. I'm going to embrace this responsibility. I'm going to do what Eddie Howe wants me to, playing that kind of pressing forward role and make an impact. And he's had to watch on and watch on and watch on. It's the side of largely struggled at the top end of the pitch. Now, going back to the away form, I do feel as if he was fit, it would just, again, I mentioned this last week, it would allow Newcastle to play higher up the pitch and put more of a press on, because he can get in behind teams, and he can press, and he can use his pace, whereas Voldemort can't. He hasn't got that pace about him. I just think opposition sides are just allowing themselves to defend a bit higher. The difference was when you've got maybe a Gordon who can get in behind and support, but I don't think that's happened enough. So I think, yeah, there are opposition defences just find it too easy at the moment. It'll be a change of dynamic, I think, when he comes in, but that's not going to. We forget he still hasn't made a minute appearance.
He's still not even training with the group.
He's still not fully fit. He's nowhere near fully fit, and I think that process can take sort of 4 or 5 weeks. So, yeah, it's going to be a rocky road, I think, until Christmas. And I get what you mean about the Sunderland away game. That, if we did go down there and win, it wouldn't be a surprise. But I just think that game feels like one when there isn't a result that wouldn't shock me. If Newcastle went down there and got beaten comfortably, it wouldn't shock me. If they went down there and won the game, it wouldn't shock me. I think it is literally anything could happen. But we've got a lot of football between now and then. I know there are outlets who are focusing on it already. Newcastle's sole focus now has to be on getting a win at Everton. And then when that's done, you look forwards.
Just a quick word on the subs, because it was some slight confusion again when they were initially made, and we had Lewis Smiley ended up at right back, and it just kind of reaffirms the hand that Eddie Howe's been dealt, really, because that should never ever happen. But he needed to make that change, and he's got limited options because of injuries.
Yeah, I actually thought Lewis did all right at right back, if I'm honest. Try to get forward and, won possession in good areas and stuff like that. But yeah, the substitutions were, I don't think they helped Newcastle in the situation they were in when they needed control in the game. I think there were substitutions made that were kind of just didn't let them do that. They didn't bring an improvement. I got bringing Voltemada on because he is that sort of presence. But then when he got the ball top end of the pitch, again, there was a lack of support. He didn't get the ball away quick enough. And in the very few moments he had, everything just felt a bit chaotic from the minute that the subs were made, and a little bit of uncertainty seemed to have crept in about who was doing what, how the team was going to function, how the system was going to work. And that's very unlike Newcastle. But then I feel as if that's crept in a little bit more in recent weeks.
Especially on the road.
Yeah.
Again, I go back to that thing I've been saying kind of all episode, is that it didn't surprise me that for the first few moments of those substitutions being made, there was a little bit of confusion, because that has crept into certain games this season. It's that kind of game management issue that a few people are raising. And look, it'd be a lot easier if you had Kieran Trippier on the bench and you said, right, you're going to go to right back, for Tino Livramento and Lewis Hall starting as well. Like, it'd be a lot easier. Then he's been forced into playing as a young centre midfielder at right back, and that probably will lead to a little bit of confusion. It's not ideal, but that's not an excuse either. This is football. You're going to be dealt injuries. You're going to be dealt players out of form. At the end of the day, you pick a team that you think is good enough to win you the game. Newcastle United were in a great position to do so, and they've not managed it for the third successive time on the road despite taking the lead, and that is a huge, huge frustration. And Eddie Howe was asked about that in his press conference, of course. So this is what he had to say on that.
The last three of which you've taken the lead in as well. How concerning a trend is that you keep throwing away these leads as well?
Yeah, I mean, I never quite know what to say to those questions, because of course I'm feeling all of that, and that's a big disappointment today, because we'd played so well in the first half. We'd done everything, not everything right, but the majority of things right. I think we'd been a threat. We'd been athletically really good. It was a much improved performance than the Brentford game. For me, the performance today was strong. I thought we did carry a goal threat, which at times away from home this year we haven't. I think we had 20 shots in the end, and so I was pleased with a lot of the performance. Of course, the two goals, the manner of the goals, disappointing. Yes, chucking away a lead again, very disappointing. Losing away from home, very disappointing. But thought there were positive signs.
Anyhow, there speaking about the performance and about the form on the road, he was talking about positive signs and how he was happy with the first half. So let's sign off on some positives then, Mark. What were the positives?
Yeah. So again, I spoke about this on social media last night. Joe Willock was a positive because he got solid game time and put in his best performance for a long time. Looked like there were elements of the old Joe Willock that we know. Malik Thiaw again putting in a very good performance, I thought, in challenging circumstances. And the fact that Tino Livramento and Lewis Hall both got another step on the road towards full fitness.
Okay. Let us know in the comments your picks for positivity out of that performance, and ultimately the 2-1 defeat for Newcastle United on the road yet again. This time
I want to be more
Marseille.
positive, by the way, because I think it is quite easy to jump to the negatives, but we can't make something up that's not there.
No.
You've got to be realistic. And look, we could sit here and be, all sort of, I guess delusional would be the right way to put it, and say there were massive positives to take. There weren't. There were 2, maybe 3 positives from last night. On the Harvey Barnes, I should say, getting another goal is a positive. But there were so many things to dislike about that performance. And the biggest thing is that it's just repeating the same mistakes and having the same conversations.
And just what Newcastle United need is another away game this weekend.
Yes, but again, it's actions, not words. Forget all the talk. Forget all of the, we're going to turn this around. We're going to do this. We're sorry about this. Go and do it. Just go there. Go to Everton. I've got no doubt whatsoever they'll be up for it because they always are at home. You know, I think Moyes is doing a good job there. I've got no doubt they'll be there. Key players will be fit and flying. Newcastle have got to manage the game in the way they can. They've got to impose themselves on Everton and go there and turn this around and do it in the right way.
It was a better performance than the ones that we saw against West Ham and Brentford. So I'm going to take that. I'm going to run with that.
I think that speaks more about the level of those performances than last night.
Potentially, and hope that they have a building block to stand upon Saturday evening. And we return on Monday celebrating all 3 points against Everton, although I'm not feeling that positive that they will do. But stranger things have happened, like beating Man City last Saturday. So
At home.
I thought I could. Oh, yeah, I spoiled that, didn't you? This has been the Monday Show on a Wednesday, looking back at Newcastle's 2-1 defeat to Marseille in the Champions League. I suppose, actually, before we sign off, we better just quickly talk about the table. Like we said last, automatic place in the Champions League towards the top 8 there. I think they'll be 8th now, aren't they? So, worried, concerned? Has it dented their chances of getting through? They get a playoff place, right?
It's dented them, yes, but it's not ended them. That's where I'd look at it. I think if they can win one of the last three, yeah, you look at that PSV game at home, that should be the one that they'd be targeting. I mean, you go and attack all 3, but I think that'll be the one where if they can get one more, they'll be in a great chance to get a playoff place.
There we go. Right. Join us on Monday for the Monday Show live. Before then, there will be a view from the opposition and the match preview looking ahead to Everton. Thank you for tuning in today. Me and Mark, as I say, we'll be back on Monday.